Hey, good morning, Choice Residential. Hope your day's off to a great start. So today I wanted to talk about a couple of things to help make the closing experience great for your clients and smoother for them, and just a couple of did you know type of scenarios here. So the first is with sellers. So you may know this, and maybe you've done this before, but you can actually do mail away closings for sellers. So of course, sellers don't need to attend the closing, and in most cases, there's really just no reason for them to. And so the few documents that they have to sign, the attorney can email those to them. They can print them off, take them to a notary, and then overnight them back to the attorney before closing. So that's really a great way to do it. Now, a little tip with that is that if the seller can scan those documents in and email them to you or email them directly to the attorney, that's also a great way to do it before they mail the signed originals back. So the paralegal or the attorney can review those documents, make sure they were signed and notarized and completed the proper way before they actually send those originals off. So that's a nice little tip for you there to make sure that things are done correctly and you don't run into any last minute issues there. But another thing that comes up a lot is that agents can actually sign the closing disclosure on behalf of their seller. So most of the time, in fact, almost every seller package I've ever seen from an attorney includes what's called a specific power of attorney so that the listing agent can sign that closing disclosure on behalf of the seller. And because oftentimes that closing disclosure, there can be little changes kind of at the last minute, that final copy often is getting signed the day of closing, whereas all of the other seller docs can be signed ahead of time and sent back. So when that closing disclosure is not ready in advance, a lot of times listing agents will sign for their sellers. Well, that's okay because you have that power of attorney. However, one thing that we require here at Choice Residential is that you have the seller electronically sign, so using .loop, but have them electronically sign a copy of that closing disclosure showing that they approve those numbers. After all, you're signing that accounting statement, that closing disclosure saying those numbers are correct. We want proof that the seller approved those numbers so they can't come back later and say, oh, well, you signed something that wasn't accurate. So we will require that in the loop if you sign the closing disclosure on behalf of your sellers. So just keep that in mind. Another thing I wanted to just mention to you is cash buyers. So a lot of agents didn't realize or don't realize that many attorneys will allow a cash buyer to sign electronically as well. So they may not need to actually show up for the closing themselves, which in terms of coordinating purchases and out-of-town buyers or investor clients, that could be really handy if they're making a cash purchase. Now, it's not going to work if they're getting a loan, of course, because the lender is going to require wet signatures and all that kind of thing. But talk to the closing attorney to see when electronic signatures may be able to suffice. And by the way, for a cash closing, the seller can also electronically sign that closing disclosure. And even for conventional transactions, the attorney may allow the seller to electronically sign at least a copy of the closing disclosure, the seller side closing disclosure. So just check those things out. That's all part of making sure that your client has a great experience. And if getting to closing is not convenient for them, then part of our job is to figure out how do we make it easier for them. Now, one little last tip about closings and how to make sure closing day goes smoothly is that if you have a client that you know likes to read everything, so when you went over the buyer agency agreement, they read it word by word with you in front of them and asked questions. Well, if you have a client like that, then you can get a copy of all of the loan documents, all the closing documents that they're going to be signing. You can ask the closing attorney to send those to you in advance. That way, the buyer has a day or two to review all of those documents and come prepared with any questions. That's going to make it so that you don't have a 2.5-hour closing, which you're not going to like, the closing attorney is not going to like, and it's just not going to be a great experience. So keep that in mind if you have a client that kind of fits that bill. So if you have any other questions about closing or how to make it a better experience for your client, let me know. I'm happy to chat through it with you. Otherwise, you guys have a great day.